We need a good and optimistic start for the new year. That message is for next week. Let's first establish in a blinding flash of the obvious and in a compelling way why we need that good and optimistic start. You don't need a pundit or a Paul or a blogger to tell you that American institutions are at risk and look shaky. There's some bad stuff staring us in the face in so many venues, and there's a chance you've wondered how bad it can get. The answer is very bad. Here are some examples. Under the ultra-thin, see-through veil of ensuring decorum, Paul Ryan, Speaker of the House and beloved Republican brainiac, the proposer of changes to Medicare and Social Security that he says don't privatize those programs, except they do, has proposed banning live streaming and photos from the floor of the House. This comes as a knee-jerk reaction to Republicans having been sucker-punched by Democrats who demanded an up or down vote on universal registration of sales of firearms. Ryan ignored them and they responded with a sit-in. Ryan tried to quash that event by closing the House session, which turned off the C-SPAN cameras. But smartphone live streaming foiled his attempt at abridging free speech. Now Ryan and Republican hissy fitters want to further restrict speech by fining Democrats and perhaps telling their mommies on them. Start thinking about abridgment of rights and be clear that practice will extend to your rights. President-elect Trump notoriously retweeted hate group tweets and offered mealy-mouthed responses to calls that he repudiate hate groups. During his campaign rallies, he repeatedly called for protesters to be beaten up and demeaned them as though they were subhuman. He continues to refuse to repudiate hate groups and has brought Steve Bannon, alt-right hater of all things not white and anyone not worshiping male dominance, to be his chief strategist. Oh, and he wants to deport 11 million Hispanics and register Muslims. Start thinking discrimination and scapegoating. Trump has hired lunatic fringe Mike Flynn to be his national security advisor. This is the same Mike Flynn who retweets phony stories and conspiracy crap. One example of which motivated North Carolina resident Edgar Welch to drive from his home to D.C. to invade a pizza parlor, believing he was rescuing sexually abused children from the basement. He believed that because Mike Flynn brainlessly retweeted the bogus story. The good news is that the bullets Welch fired into the floor of the pizza restaurant didn't hurt anyone. The bad news is that Mike Flynn, the fool who didn't have the sense not to retweet this blatantly false story, is and will be advising the new president on when and where to use America's military might, including nuclear weapons. Start thinking about military adventurism giving rise to horrific catastrophes. There are many more examples of the democracy-killing efforts underfoot, including Trump's ridiculing and criticizing of the press so that you won't find credence in reports from investigative journalists who report on Trumpian malfeasance. To bring this to a focus, let's check in with President Harry Truman's Vice President, Henry Wallace. He knew something about the harm that authoritarian regimes do to democracy and has agreed to speak to you from his day and explain this fully and clearly. Click the first link in the written blog to download a PDF copy of his comments as originally published in the New York Times on April 9, 1944. Click the second link to download a highlighted, easier-to-read version. Read it, especially the highlighted parts, and you just may see a parallel between then and now, and you'll begin to realize just how bad the bad stuff we're facing really is. No one knows who said it first, but it's often attributed to Sinclair Lewis. When fascism comes to America, it would be wrapped in a flag and carrying a cross. Fascism? In America? Do the reading. Do an online search of fascism in America. The alarm rang a while ago. The snooze button is broken from our banging on it, hoping the alarm would go away, and we all have to wake up. I've heard it said and am beginning to believe that we are one or two ISIS-related terrorist attacks in America away from Mr. Extremist, everything in superlative and false language, President Trump declaring martial law and suspending civil liberties. Just look at those he surrounds himself with. Consider his absolutist, power-grabbing, self-congratulating nature. Factor in his pathologically thin skin and the retaliatory abuse he heaps on innocent people. This just doesn't look good for our nation. If you had already caught a glimpse of this, you likely have wondered what can be done and who will stand up to the bullies. Start with this: it's up to us. In addition, both some help and some hope are on the way and will be in the next post. Stay tuned. Meanwhile, it's your turn now, in the comments section below. I'm Jack Alshuler.